may not have grown up in a busy city, but I have been spoiled by a nearly endless amount of outdoor activities. Among those activities are hiking and camping, but one of the most enjoyable things about my hometown is the easy access to being on the water, specifically boating. I'm not even close to financially capable of owning a boat, but my friend Trevor is lucky enough to own one. Growing up, his family lived on the water, and they've always had a decent-sized boat. We would spend hours on that thing. When Trevor got his boating license, his dad would let us take the boat out. When we were in high school, we found a small island located on one of the boating routes we took. If I had to estimate the size of the island, I would guess that it was roughly the size of a big Walmart. All through high school, college, and early adulthood, we would frequent the island. Once in a while, there would be a few other people fishing or something like that, but most of the time it was empty. It was like our own little island. I assumed the reason it was empty a lot was that there wasn't really a good place to dock the boat. Obviously there was no dock, and it only had a small strip of shoreline. The rest of the island was surrounded by rocky cliffs and trees. Trevor would anchor the boat down, and we would swim the short distance to the shore. It seems like a hassle, but it really wasn't. Over the years, we explored every inch of the island. We even set up markers in certain areas so we knew where we were. In high school, we would play epic games of manhunt on the island. As we got older, it became more of a party spot where we could be loud and wild and do what people that age do. One of the crazier things about the island I noticed as I got older was that there was almost no wildlife on the island. No birds, nests, no small mammals, no reptiles. I mean, we rarely even saw bugs on the island, which is crazy. Whenever we would bring someone new to the island, we would tell them stories about it. Things like the island being cursed just to get a rise out of people. We made everything up, so I never believed there was anything to be scared of, until one night a few years ago that I still can't really explain. Trevor had his own boat by this time in our lives. He suggested something to us that I couldn't believe we had never done before. He suggested that we stay overnight on the island. He could bring 8 of us on his boat, and the 8 of us could have a camp out on the island. It seemed like an amazing idea, especially because a girl named Megan in our friend group and I were crushing on each other at the time. This would be an ideal situation for us to get some alone time. We took off from the dock in the afternoon and arrived on the island around 4 in the afternoon. The first few hours were amazing. We gave Megan and the others a tour of the island. We showed them all the cool things we had discovered over the years. As night was falling, we cooked some hot dogs over a fire and started to have a couple of drinks. Up to this point of the night, it had been one of the best times I'd ever had on the island. Trevor kept the fire going, and we all sat around it telling stories and just really enjoying the vibe. It was several hours into the night when I started to notice that Megan was acting a little strange. She was usually always laughing and smiling, but for some reason she was quiet. She looked almost like she was lost in thought. When I asked her if she was okay, she kept looking at the trees that were several feet away from where we were sitting. Before she answered me, she paused and kept scanning the trees, which were just about as pitch black from where we were sitting. She said she kept hearing noises from the trees, noises that sounded like movement. I told her it was probably an animal, to which she brought up what we had told her earlier, that we had never seen an animal on the island before. I reminded her that we had also never been on the island overnight before, and that it was probably a nocturnal animal and we had nothing to worry about. She still looked concerned as she continued squinting at the trees. She said, "I don't think an animal's out there." I thought maybe she had too much to drink, but she barely finished her only beer. Everyone except Trevor and I started to get a little freaked out. Trevor's girlfriend Rosie asked if we were sure if we were the only ones on the island, and we were sure. There was no boat anchored anywhere, and we had walked the entire island earlier and didn't see any evidence that people were there. I was confident that the darkness was playing tricks on the eyes and ears of our friends. Once the fear came out, it was like we couldn't calm them down. Trevor pulled out a flashlight and told everyone to relax. He said he was going to point it at the trees and show everyone that nobody's in the woods and that their imagination had gotten off the rails. He slowly moved the flashlight beam horizontally across the tree line. Megan screamed and pointed. Everyone else jumped because of Megan. She said 2 people were standing in the woods as the flashlight passed. Nobody else saw it. Trevor moved the flashlight beam back, and sure enough, 2 people were standing next to the trees. The image of them staring back at us is one of the scariest things I've ever witnessed with my own eyes. They were almost completely hidden, which is why we didn't see them at first. Trevor jumped back, and the light beam went with him. When he got back up and shone the light in the same direction as the two people, they were gone. We started to panic. We definitely saw two people standing there, and now they weren't. Trevor started yelling in their direction, telling them to come out. Nothing happened. A few of us ran over there to intimidate them, which, in hindsight, was pretty stupid. When we got over there, nobody was there. We could hear laughing in the woods, but it was faint. I suggested to Trevor that we should leave, just in case these two meant us any kind of harm. I could tell Trevor's pride was hurt, but he ultimately agreed. We started to pack up our essentials and put the fire out. The entire time, Megan was telling us to hurry up because she could hear them laughing in the woods, but no matter where she put the light beam, she couldn't see them. We started back in the water so we could get on the boat. Just before Trevor and I could get on the boat, Megan screamed as she continued pointing the light onto the beach. The two people were now on the beach. I jumped onto the boat, and just as Trevor was getting on the boat, the woman called out Trevor's name. He stopped and looked back at her. She said that she wanted him to walk with her in the forest so that she could show him something cool. Then she could come back for the rest of us. Trevor almost went back to the island. It was almost like the only thought he had in that moment was going back. I grabbed him and essentially threw him back on the boat. He didn't say a thing or even mention that he looked like he was starting to head back. We got the anchor and departed from the island. As we were leaving, Megan kept the light on the island. The man was gone, but the woman was on the shore watching us leave. We kept a light on her until she walked back into the woods. Trevor took a small lap around the island to see if any boat was tied up anywhere, and disturbingly, there were none. These two people were already on the island when we arrived, and we had no idea where they came from or how long they'd been there. The island was far enough away that it would be an incredibly hard swim, especially for these two. Whenever I think about that night, my brain goes to some insane places. There isn't anywhere on the island, at least that we know about, where you can hide. We would have heard them at some point when we were walking through the island in the afternoon. It was like these two people just appeared out of nowhere. Trevor and I went back to the island one more time after that night. It was the next day, and we went to try and see if there was any evidence of these two. A few feet into the woods, there was something leaning up against a tree. It was what looked like a human figure made from sticks. We didn't stay much longer after that. We got in Trevor's boat and left. I have no idea what happened for sure that night, but I can confidently say that the island isn't right. For now, I don't have any interest in going back, but I am happy with the memories I made there. I want to share a story that's bothered me for a while now. Whenever I'm alone, I tend to think back to this day, and my mind goes to some dark places. I've shared this story a couple of times, hoping that the person I tell will tell me that I'm crazy and overthinking things, but unfortunately, they think something bad happened as well. This is one of those stories that, if you think too much about it, you'll lose sleep. This happened to me a few years ago at the marina I used to keep my boat docked at. I've been docked at several marinas during my lifetime, and even though many of them have issues, they're not the type of place you think of scary events happening. Unless you're afraid of boats or water, marinas are usually harmless places. For most of my life, I've been alone. When I was old enough to get a boat, I saved my money and made it happen. Since I was 19 years old, I've owned a boat. The summer of this story, I practically lived on the boat. That specific marina was quieter than most others, and I would just spend countless days relaxing, reading, fishing, and just living my life. One feature that this marina offered was something called a transit slip. What that means is that somebody can dock their boat at one of the docks for the night or a couple of days. The marina gives them a slip for an allotted amount of time. It's for people who travel or can't make it back to their specific marina. Over the years, I've met tons of fascinating people from all over the country who use these transit slips to dock their boats. One afternoon, this seemingly normal boat came to the marina and received a transit slip. The spot next to me was vacant, so they docked the boat there for the night. As he was bringing the boat in, I got out of mine to help him dock it. That's what a lot of boating people do. You help your neighbor. The guy yelled at me and told me he didn't want or need my help. I wasn't offended. I get some people don't want others near their boat, so I let him be. Once he secured his boat and tied it up, I introduced myself and told him that if he needed anything to just knock on my door. The guy looked at me, made almost no expression, and walked by me and back onto his boat. I'm a quiet guy and I don't necessarily like small talk, but if someone says hello to me, I'll always respond. I was a little put off by this guy's lack of basic human interaction. After he walked by me and went back onto his boat, he went down into his small cabin and slammed the door. His boat was just big enough that he had a small walk-down cabin in the front, which I assume basically had a bed, and that's probably it. Before I walked back to my boat, I smelled something horrible. I started sniffing around my area and concluded that the smell was coming from his boat. It wasn't the smell of fish or body odor. It was worse than that. It was something overpowering. It was the worst thing I'd ever smelled in my life. The guy never gave me his name, but I noticed he had a coffee thermos next to the steering wheel, and the name on it said Buddy. About an hour had passed since he docked the boat, and I heard some commotion coming from his boat. It sounded like things smashing on the floor, and I heard a glass break. There was a small window on the side of his boat, but it was covered up. And then Buddy emerged from his cabin. He looked at me and then kept walking down the dock toward the marina building. There was a shower and bathroom up there. I assumed that's where he was going. Even though I had tried helping him and talking to him, watching him walk away was actually the first time I got a decent look at him. He was about 6 feet tall and a husky fella. I would say he was in his late 60s. He was mostly bald, except for the white hair forming a horseshoe around his shining head. His most notable feature to me was his thick black glasses. They looked super magnified and took up half his face at least. He was gone about 10 minutes, maybe less. During that time, every few minutes I would hear something banging around in his boat with more of that muffled sound. I thought maybe he had a dog in there. When he came back, I tried talking to him again. I told him that I heard something in his boat and that I just wanted to let him know if he had a dog, there was a big field next to the marina where he could take the dog out and let it run around. He came over to the back of my boat where I was sitting, leaned down to me, and said, "I don't have a dog, it's only me." Then he stormed back onto his boat and back down into the cabin. I couldn't imagine what was making all that noise while he was gone. If he didn't have a pet and he claimed he was alone, I had no idea what I was hearing. Once he was back on his boat, I didn't hear any more commotion or muffled sounds. The rest of the night was mostly uneventful. Every so often, I would catch that faint smell again if the wind started blowing. I got ready for bed around 10 that night. After seeing him on the dock several hours prior, he never came back out of his cabin for the entire night. At 3 in the morning, I woke up to that same sound. It sounded like a struggle of some kind happening on his boat, except this time, I heard Buddy. He kept saying "shut up" with an aggressive tone. It sounded like he was trying to be quiet. I didn't hear another voice except for whatever that strained, muffled sound was. I heard him yell the word "enough," and then everything was quiet again. I stayed up the rest of the night after that. I tried to think about what I heard, and I just wasn't sure. The rest of the night, Buddy was quiet, and there was no other commotion over there. At 7 that morning, Buddy left his cabin with a duffel bag and was heading for the bathrooms. I knew it was a bad idea, but something compelled me to go to his boat and see if anyone was in trouble. I waited for him to get all the way down to the dock and out of sight. I snuck over to his boat, and as soon as I set foot on it, the smell almost knocked me over. I went to the cabin door and saw that it had a custom door and lock on it. I knocked on the door and asked if anyone was inside. I was trying to think of some lie just in case I got caught, but instead of silence or somebody answering the door, I heard that strained, muffled sound again, and this time it was much louder since I was so close. I tried asking again if anyone was down there, and it was like the sound got even louder, almost like it was pleading. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know when Buddy was going to come back, so I left. I ran back to my boat and down into my cabin. I contemplated calling the police, but I didn't. It's easy for someone who wasn't in this situation hearing it now to say they would have called the cops, but hindsight's always 20/20. In these moments, as you're unfolding, you have a million things running through your mind, and one of those things is that you're overreacting and overthinking things. That's how I felt. I had to be overthinking whatever was happening. While I was down there staring at my phone, I looked up at my window, and standing right there was Buddy. It made me jump. He was looking at me through my window, but he didn't say anything or do anything. He looked at me for a moment and then went back to his boat. I watched him as he walked back toward the door. He stopped at his cabin door for a moment before he opened it, almost like he was thinking about something. He started to untie his boat and leave the dock. This time I didn't offer to help, obviously. This guy gave me the worst vibes I've ever felt from another human being. I've met rude and vile people before, but for some reason, this guy gave me a feeling in the pit of my stomach that I've never felt before. As I watched him sail away, I never saw him again. This happened years ago, and I'm still plagued by this experience. I try to tell myself that I'm overreacting, but then I think, what if I'm not overreacting? What if that guy had some person tied up in his boat, and I did nothing? I grew up in an area where you could constantly hear your neighbors fighting with one another, and it sounded like someone could die at any second and nobody called the police, and nobody ever died. You kind of just ignored other people's personal business, and that's unfortunately what I did here. I'm not one for having an overreactive imagination, but this is the one time I hope that my thoughts are incorrect, and hopefully Buddy isn't the monster I think he might have been. I don't believe in curses. I'm sharing the story of something that happened to me a few months ago, mainly because I'm interested in what people think. I figured that, as a modern society, we've moved past things like curses and folklore. A little more than 3 months ago, me and my other 2 friends, Dustin and Chris, went out on Dustin's boat to fish. Whenever the 3 of us are fortunate enough to have the same day off, we try to take advantage of the opportunity and get out on his boat. We tended to leave Dustin's house around dawn and spend the majority of the morning fishing whenever we went out. This specific day was no different. About 30 minutes into our trip, I heard Dustin start to mumble under his breath. We asked him what was wrong, and he pointed up ahead. Just on the horizon was a beautiful boat. I'm not a boat guy, even though I fish as much as I can. I don't know the first thing about boats. Chris and I saw a boat on the horizon and nothing more, but Dustin noticed something as we got closer. It was barely noticeable at first, but the closer we got, the more noticeable it was. The boat had an orange flag flying on it. On the orange flag were these 2 black shapes. I didn't know this at the time, but Dustin informed us that this specific flag was known as a VDS flag, which stands for Visual Distress Signal. Ordinarily, we would never approach another boat like this, especially on such a massive body of water, but if they were really in distress, we needed to help. As we got close to the boat, Dustin slowed down. He shouted from his boat if everything was okay, but there was no response. As Dustin maintained control of his boat, I tried looking at the other boat to see if I could see anything. From my vantage point, I couldn't see anyone. The boat was huge. Dustin told us the size of the boat is considered a yacht, a small one, but still way bigger than Dustin's little fishing boat. Chris asked if we should just leave. Dustin wasn't sure. I tried calling for help, but there was no service at all where we were. I told Dustin I would jump over to the boat and make sure everything was okay on their end. He didn't love the idea. In case some older guy was sick or something, and then he sees me on the boat, he didn't want them to have a heart attack or something horrible. That was even more reason for me to jump over and make sure everything was okay. We argued for a bit, but then he agreed to let me jump over onto the other boat when I told him I was CPR certified and somebody inside may need help. Dustin got as close as he could, and I jumped to the back of the yacht. I kept yelling, asking if anybody was there, and letting them know that I was answering the distress call. I wanted to make sure I was loud enough to announce myself. On the bow of the boat where I just boarded, there were a bunch of cushioned seats and a table, and it looked like somebody had been there not long ago. 4 fishing rods looked like they were getting ready to be used. On the table were 3 coffee mugs that still had steam coming out of them. On one of the seats was a nice Michigan State pullover jacket that looked like it had just been thrown down. I made my way to a sliding door that was wide open. I continued shouting, asking if anyone needed help. I noticed while I was walking to the sliding door that there were several muddy footprints of various sizes all over the back part of the boat. On its own, that's not that weird, especially if you're out fishing. The weird part is that it seemed like nobody was on this boat, even with all this evidence. I walked into the room, and it was a mess. All the cabinets were open, and there was stuff all over the floor. Straight ahead was a bed that was tucked into this little nook. In the right situation, it looked cozy. Nothing was on the bed except for a bunch of pillows and blankets that were all balled up against the wall. The last place I needed to look was the bathroom, and the door was closed. My heart was racing, not because I was scared, but because I half expected to see a person in there passed out or worse. I slowly opened the door, and just like the rest of the boat, the bathroom was empty. I walked back into the big room and started walking toward the sliding door. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something moving. I turned around quickly, and I saw the pillows falling off the bed and the blanket shifting. A frail, older woman sat up and looked right at me. I tried to assure the woman that I'm only here to help because I saw the flag. The woman didn't react at all. She sat there completely emotionless. She barely looked like she was breathing. If I didn't see her move a second ago and then blink a few times, I'd think she was dead. She was small, her hair was braided, and her skin was tan and looked like rubber. Her eyes just looked back as she stared at me. It felt like she was staring through me. I tried my best to sound comforting, and I told the woman that I was going back to Dustin's boat and that we were going to help. I ran out and jumped back over to Dustin's boat. I told them we need to ride until we can call for help. I told them about the woman alone on the boat, and she looked like she was in shock or something because she was hiding, and then how she just sat there. While Dustin and Chris were trying to understand what I was saying, the woman appeared from the sliding door and walked to the back of the boat where the orange flag was flying. She slowly started to lower the flag. Once she had it in her hands, she threw it under the table and slowly walked back inside. We didn't know what to do. She got rid of the flag, but I argued that this woman didn't look well. She looked like she needed assistance. Dustin agreed and started heading back in the direction we came until I could get a signal on my phone. Once I got a signal, I called the police. I told them about the boat with the distress flag and that the woman was alone. Even though there was a lot of evidence to the contrary, they said they were going to take a look. Not knowing how long that would take, we decided to head back just in case she needed help before the police boat arrived. When we got to the location where the boat just was, it was gone. We had no idea what way she could have gone, so we couldn't follow her. We never made it fishing that morning. We were so worked up from all of that, we just decided to head back and hang out at Dustin's house. We never heard back from the police. I have no idea if they followed up on it or just ignored it because there was no boat when they arrived. Something happened that morning. When I think about all the pieces, I add them up, and the results always terrify me. This woman summoned us with a distress flag, and after I boarded the boat, she took the flag down and didn't speak one word. I can't figure out why she was hiding, and why there was so much evidence of others on the boat, mainly the hot, steaming mugs of coffee, but only this small, ragged woman. The reason why some of my friends think I was cursed is after boarding that boat that morning, I've had a streak of terrible luck. Everything from losing my job to totaling my car. Dustin's elderly father told us about some old folklore about a curse on the water, but I don't believe that for a second. I think the bad luck is just a coincidence, and blaming it on a curse is a convenient scapegoat. I don't know what happened that morning. I know what I saw, and I didn't see anyone else on that boat. I'm sharing this story in the hopes that it gets read, and I would love to hear what other people think. Am I cursed? Did this woman commit a heinous crime before I showed up? Or is everything just a wild and crazy coincidence?